What is going on, guys? We are here a little impromptu stream on a best ball format that maybe is a little different than other people are used to, but I'm super excited to talk about. And maybe we can take a little break from if you're watching this live or if you're watching this maybe later in this week. We're amidst a little bit of chaos in the NFL world with the Calvin Ridley drama. Maybe we can take a little step back on what is kind of my favorite best ball format. If you've listened to me on any other shows, streams, podcasts, whatever, I've kind of talked and hinted a little bit about this NBA playoff best ball format that I think is maybe the most interesting one. There's so many crazy variables. There's so many fun aspects to it. And it's honestly really what got me hooked on best ball in general, which is kind of crazy. You would think it would be NFL, but Underdog dropped their very first NBA playoff best ball tournament today, the dance, I believe it is called. So we're going to get into a little bit of very, very early strategy thoughts, ADP thoughts, all that kind of fun stuff. And then we will hop into a draft. Let's get into it. Before we hop in, as Silas says, make sure you hit the like button. Same thing that every person on YouTube of all time has ever said. Like and subscribe. It really helps. Especially for the NBA thing. Quick side tangent, I guess. You know, I obviously I love the NBA just in general, but I think the NBA around fantasy sports, and again in particular this playoff format, is like wildly underrated. And so I kind of feel like anything we can do to maybe spread the word a little bit, get it out there, grow these tournaments and such, maybe get, they'll never do quite what the NFL does in terms of volume and popularity. But I think anything we can do to kind of spread the word a bit on the NBA product is a good thing. And the other thing I will say before we hop into it is make sure you go to spikeweek.com, the best resource, more than me rambling about strategy and players and all this other stuff, more than really just about anything, is the free Discord community. Go to spikeweek.com. Like I said, 100% free to hop in. Go to the header, click Discord. You can join totally for free. You just have to hop in. It's round the clock, 24/7, 365. Tons of people way smarter than me talking through basically every aspect of strategy, player, every format. There's even stuff, non-best ball. You have a dynasty question, you're talking DFS, whatever. There's space within that community for everything and tons of awesome resources. So many smart people and so much good stuff going on in there. So that's my number one biggest recommendation for sure. So Underdog just dropped this contest. Let me go ahead and we'll just pull up and walk through first, the very first step, right before we think about any players, anything relating to strategy or whatever. We got to kind of look at the rules, look at the format, look at understand what is this game that we're actually playing, especially with this contest. It's very unique, right? Relative to maybe what we're used to in best ball. So obviously it is a playoff only format, right? If a team does not make the playoffs, their players are certainly not accumulating any points. And the NBA playoffs are obviously very unique, right? We have the play-in tournament on both sides, seed 7 through 10, make the play-in. They're not technically in the playoffs yet. So that throws a small wrinkle into things. And then obviously it goes round by round, right? First round, second round, third round, on to the NBA finals. And your players that you draft, of which you draft 10 total players, accumulate points throughout, the entirety of the playoffs. And each round, right? In the first round, the group that we draft in, we're competing against them in this first round. but it's very different in one kind of special way from like the if you played NFL playoff contest, right? An NFL playoff contest is just one game for each round. In the NBA, it's a series. So you could draft the team that wins the NBA title, but if they just run through everybody throughout the playoffs, right? Sweep everybody or win in 5 or whatever, you may draft, let's say it's the Bucks. The Bucks win again and they just go nuts through the Eastern Conference and they sweep the first couple of teams. It's going to be very difficult if you go way too heavy on the Bucks to make it to that final round of this playoff best ball contest if they don't play enough games to accumulate enough points, right? So there's this balancing act that we're constantly doing about we have to advance and we have to score enough, points, but how do we, without being able to at all accurately predict how many games these series are going to go, how do we structure our teams and draft the right kinds of players and the right amount of players from each team, et cetera, in order to set ourselves up to be able to make that final and have a team that can win in that final, but, make it there. We have to make it there, right? And I think it's maybe the hardest aspect in all of best ball. We can talk for days about, how to structure regular season teams, right? NFL season long teams. And you really can't truly go wrong with most kind of structures, strategies, even like player takes. You can't really go wrong with too much of it. But in this, it is so unique and so difficult to project that the structure of our teams becomes even more important. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but between all of us, we can start to kind of talk through some of it. So first things first, $10 entry, $200,000 total prize pool, at least on this first one. They'll definitely launch some other contests. We'll see, kind of how fast this one fills up and what other contests we get. But there's almost 23,000 entrants. So a fairly large tournament, right? You can enter, of course, 150 times, and you draft in a group of 6, 10 rounds with you and five other people in the draft. Here's the payout structure. So fairly flat, a little bit, flat relative to maybe some of the other tournaments that we see, like in DFS, 30,000 to first. As we see here, obviously, round 1, then the blah, blah, blah. You see, we just walk through the playoffs. Each round of the playoffs is a round of this tournament. Scoring, you guys have probably played NBA. If you have not, make sure you check out the scoring. The one big thing on Underdog that is fairly different, fairly unique is the steals and blocks. So if you haven't played on Underdog, it is FanDuel scoring. If you play DFS, it's the same thing as FanDuel with steals and blocks worth 3 points. So that's actually a pretty big deal, pretty big difference. So our roster, maybe the most important thing, our roster, right? You do have positional, not limits, but you don't just draft 10 players and get the 10 total points, the best scores out of all the players, right? You do have to have one guard, one big, they call it, right? One big man, one wing, and then you get 2 flexes, and you have a draft a total of 10 players, so you have 5 bench spots. So that you'll see as when we start to get into this draft here in just a second, you'll see that those positional things can get a little tricky at times. There are certain positions that are deeper or weaker than other ones, and as you start to structure your team, you want to make sure that you're able to fill every position, particularly once we get to the finals, right? And every round, if your team loses and you lose one of those positions, if you only drafted 2 bigs and you lost one of them in the first round, right now you only have one. It starts to draw thinner. And so when you start to construct your team, right, you hop into your draft, you start to build this team that is telling some form of a story, right? That's the cliche thing we all say, but it is very true. I'm drafting and I take Steph Curry in the first round. Okay, I've made some form of a bet on the Warriors. As I continue to draft, I'm telling this story with players from other teams that I'm drafting. And there's thousands, right, of different variations that we can put together that are these stories that, can make sense in terms of how the playoffs are going to play out, in particular, who is going to play in the finals. But we have to be cognizant of, you can build for multiple different scenarios, right? Draft a few players from a couple teams in the West, and then do the same thing in the East, right? So you can give yourself a couple different kinds of pairings, but then you also have to be cognizant of those positions. And when we get into, which we'll see again in just a second when we hop into a draft, it's not easy. it's really not easy. Not only because of the lack of depth of some positions, right? But some teams may not have viable bigs to draft, or you may have drafted that Steph Curry and the Warriors is a pretty good example that if you draft Steph Curry in the first round, guess what? The Warriors don't have any big men you can draft. You'll see Draymond Green is listed as a wing. Even Kevon Looney is listed as a wing. And so you need to understand that fact, right? And so you start pairing teams up, and you still need to make sure that you're filling those positions. But, in the NFL in general, certainly not. This is a blanket statement that it's not always true, but there's always like another wide receiver you can draft, right? Like even if that guy sucks, you can stop it. Silas says James Wiseman. James Wiseman, we'll get into it. James Wiseman is not going to be playing in the playoffs. If he is, that's probably a bad sign. Well, it could be a good sign, I guess. Maybe he is somehow better after having not played for the last while, which I highly doubt. But they are certainly at their best playing without James Wiseman, in my opinion. So just real quick, back to the other thing, we'll start to feel out the ADPs and the types of combinations, just like we did in NFL, to see what kind of pairings and stuff we can put together. It's obviously just so fresh. I think I got 3 drafts in before we started this. I was trying to fire some to get a little bit comfortable, so I wasn't totally flying blind. But at the end of the day, I'm still pretty much, honestly, flying blind. But the big thing for me that I've started to feel out already in some of these drafts, things we've learned from other formats, things we learned from last year, is you're just kind of always trying to thread that needle between giving yourself, the quote unquote best players to help you continue to advance. Obviously, this early, right? This is the way too early playoff best ball draft. But it's very difficult now. We don't know who's playing who, right? But we can still do things in a way that allow us to thread the needle between drafting the best players, right, that help me advance. They're going to score the most points right away, and correlating and setting up my team structures, right? I don't want to overly correlate and overly set up my team structures where I'm drafting a bunch of guys maybe later that are just absolutely have no shot of contributing to me early, and they may never even contribute to me, right? Even if that team continues to advance. But we do need to make sure that at the end, if we get to the 10th round, I've set up my structure that I need the Warriors to play, let's say, the Celtics or the Bucks in the championship, right? Based on who I've drafted, I got my 3 Warriors, I got 2 Bucks, and who did I say? 2 Celtics. But I don't have a big man, right, to play out between those teams because, like we said, the Warriors outside of James Wiseman don't really have a big man. Maybe I have drafted a Celtics big man, but I don't have a Bucks big man. Like I need to be cognizant of that. And look, maybe I don't even know. I actually haven't checked. In that scenario, maybe the Serge Ibaka, I assume he's a big man in this. I hope he's a big man. He's not a guy that you're particularly excited about drafting, but on a certain team, I need to go find that guy that fits the story that I'm trying to tell with that team. Other times, I will already have all those positions filled, right? And so you have to weigh the pros and cons of, do I draft the Serge Ibaka who gives me that extra correlation, but is really never going to come into play for me, maybe until the finals. That still makes sense. Other times it might not. I might draft a guy on a team, or maybe they're in the play-in. Maybe, it's a one-off, but it's a guy who I know is going to score a ton of fantasy points when he's out there. right? Again, we're doing this balancing act, trying to thread that needle between giving me the highest projection and setting myself up for success. I think generally, as a rule, if there's no blanket rules, that's like a big thing that I'm constantly like trying to remind myself and just communicate with people that I talk to. There's absolutely no such thing as a blanket rule, especially in a contest as crazy and unpredictable as Mark says. 100% unpredictable. Look at last year. Look at like the Hawks making a run. And honestly, I don't think people really saw the Suns Bucks thing coming, right? But in a contest this unpredictable, we can't have general rules, but blanket rules. We can have general rules. You can't have like total blanket firm black or white rules. But I think leaning towards the correlation is generally going to be a better strategy. Focusing in on a few teams in general in each draft that you do is pretty much going to lead us down the right path. And so doing enough drafts to where you start to get comfortable with these ADPs and comfortable finding the guys that you need to pair together based on how you've started your draft, I think is really important in this contest. So let's see how we can do it. Right. Oh, one other thing I forgot. I was going to talk a little bit about a couple teams and some team related stuff that I think is important that maybe some people won't take into consideration enough. So if we pull up 538's like current NBA predictions, right? Their playoffs, probability of making the playoffs, chances of making the finals, chances of winning the NBA championship. I think people will be a little bit surprised to see what 538 is saying. And now this is not the end all be all, of course. Right? If you have a stand that's against this, right? There's somebody down here. Maybe you love the Clippers. You really believe in the Clippers, right? And they're, I guess, kind of a crazy one because we don't totally know what's going on with Paul George. But they're not even a lock to make the playoffs, right? They're actually probably headed for the play-in. But you believe in the Clippers and you believe, you're going to ignore this. That there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're probably going to get paid off better when it's one of these teams that the market is maybe a little bit lower on, kind of like the Suns last year. But I thought it was interesting because when you start to go through some of these drafts, you're going to see that the ADPs don't necessarily align with what we see here on 538. In particular, honestly, the top 6 teams, almost most of the top 10. I was actually surprised to see this too. Honestly, the Bucks, that's not surprising at all for me. But the Celtics right now sitting atop 538's chances of winning the NBA Finals, ever so slightly over the last year's two Finals teams. But I think people will be very surprised to see that, and you will also see when we get into this draft in a second that ADP does not align with this view of the Celtics. So they would be a team as of right now, in these very early drafts that I'm prioritizing. Just because, I generally agree with this. If you've watched over the last few weeks, in particular since the trade deadline, but even a little bit before then, the Celtics are playing as well, if not better than anybody in the entire NBA. The addition of Derek White has been huge. The changes they've made, like a little bit of defensive schematics, and just the roster that they put together is outstanding. And the ADP does not, outside of kind of Jason Tatum, but even then, I'm not sure Tatum is getting the love in these way too early drafts here. Bucks and Suns, I think most people understand that, and I think the ADP largely aligns with those guys. The Nuggets is a really interesting one, right? Jokic obviously goes high, as he should, but I don't think people think of the Nuggets as one of the potential favorites to win the NBA championship. Part of this probably has to do with what you think about Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr.'s chances of coming back and playing this year are. But you'll see that most of these other Nuggets, aside from Jokic, are basically free in these drafts. So I think that's a potential spot. And then my team, like one of my adopted teams. There's two basically, but the Miami Heat is one of my favorite teams here in the NBA, and similar to the Celtics, the ADP does not align with them being one of the favorites to win the NBA championship either. It is kind of funny and bizarre that the number, like, there's all this drama in the Eastern Conference, right? The Bucks are the favorite, and I get it. I get why they are. I don't even really disagree. But then you have, obviously, with the Harden and Simmons thing, the Sixers and the Nets are two kind of sexier teams, right? Everybody's all in on this Harden, the new Harden Embiid Sixers. You have, obviously, the Nets. KD's back. Kyrie's back. Simmons will probably be back at some point, and they're excited. I totally agree. But they're getting all the hype. And which is, where are the Nets? Look at this. Look at the Nets. They're not even a lock for the playoffs right now. Probably because I actually haven't looked today. I probably should have looked at that before we got into this. They are still ninth in the East, right? The Wizards are 2 games back of them. Yeah, the Wizards are 2 games back of them, and I don't think anyone really expects the Wizards to catch them or the Wizards to even try to catch them. I guess technically the Knicks could catch them, but they're 5.5 games back, and they've been terrible. But like, this team is, I'm not sure that they can get out of the play-in, right? Multiple teams are going to have to really collapse for the Nets to get out of the play-in, which makes things kind of rough on them for this format. But you're not getting any discounts on them because we know inherently how good this team is or can be. So same thing. I'm not jumping off the Nets, but it's going to be very difficult for them. They're going to have to run through all the best teams. They're going to have to get Ben Simmons acclimated. And just anytime you're playing in that play-in, no matter how good you are, anything can happen in one game, right? And so the Nets thing is very, very interesting. I'll hit a couple questions before, but I did just want to pull this up because I think, we have the 1 seed in the East who is, the tied for the 4th favorite to win the championship based on 538. And you'll see all those guys are free. The favorite based on 538 to win the championship, and most of their guys are totally free. Meanwhile, you got to pay top couple round prices for all the Nets who are probably just going to be in the play-in, right? I love the Warriors too, but the Warriors, sit way down here and are in a total free fall. Obviously, they're about to welcome Draymond Green back fairly soon, and that's a pretty big difference. I still love the Warriors. There's no hatred for me on the Warriors, but they sit way down here, right? And they're expensive, like extremely expensive in these drafts. So I think just keeping that in mind is an important thing before you start to really, really dive in. Just kind of taking a step back and be like, oh, I like this player, I like that player, and viewing it through this lens can be helpful, whether you agree or disagree, necessarily with 538. So couple questions. Niall says, will this be on DK? I assume at some point DraftKings will launch one of these tournaments. It's tough to say when that will be. They did it for in-season. They NFL in-season. They did it for NFL playoffs, I believe. But it's not quite as fleshed out of a product as Underdog is, but I do suspect that there will be something from DraftKings. And Mark says, are you able to set your own personal pre-draft rankings in this contest? Yes, I can even share because I got to reshare this screen anyway, and we can look at that. If I go to rankings and I go to NBA and I go down here to the bottom, you see 2021, 2022 NBA playoffs. You can set your rankings. And so you guys see here, before we hop in, right? Giannis goes 1, which makes sense. Steph is 2. Embiid is 3. Durant is 4. Harden. Then we get the Suns guys. Then we get Mitchell, right? Then finally Jokic. Klay Thompson sitting at 10th overall ADP-wise, right? Andrew Wiggins, 13th. Luka, we don't get to Luka down here till 16, and why are they that much cheaper and different? So anyway, look at this. Kevon Looney, Jordan Poole, Some of these are pretty funny. Look how long it takes to get to Jimmy Butler. 21 on the first place team and a really, really good Heat team. Tatum at 26. We didn't even touch on the Bulls, and 538 really does not like the Bulls. But I think they're an interesting one too. They're going to bring Lonzo back and they're going to bring Caruso back before the playoffs start, hopefully. I haven't seen any of the latest updates, but that's always been the timeline. Is they're going to bring those guys back, and they're still chugging along with a strong record. And we know that they have DeRozan and Levine and Vooch. And am I expecting the Bulls to make a crazy run here? No, not really. But they were first in the East when they were fully healthy, and they were better than anyone gave them credit for. And the East is just kind of chaotic right now. And no one is drafting them like they have any shot. The other team, I think it was Josh, was in the Discord. He mentioned the Grizzlies. They're kind of like that version to me of the Bulls in the West. If I'm predicting the playoffs right now, am I saying, oh yeah, the Grizzlies are going to make a run, I'm picking them to win the No, of course not. Of course I'm not. But this is a really good basketball team that can absolutely make a run. There's no, to me, like crazy prohibitive favorites in either conference. A lot of the top teams have flaws, right? Even the Suns, Chris Paul, broken thumb. His current timeline is he'll be back for the playoffs, but like, who knows? Who really knows? Will he be 100%? I don't know. The Jazz are flawed. Who knows what happens with the Nuggets? And so it's so wide open that some of these teams that maybe the market is just a little bit lower on, I think are some of the most interesting ones for these drafts. Jason says, Morant one spot ahead of LeBron on a play-in game. I'm just looking. I'm not following because the Grizzlies are in third and the Lakers are in ninth. If you're talking about the teams, unless you're talking about the you're talking about the rankings here. I see. I got you. Yeah. I mean, look at Morant doesn't go till 20. Like, the Lakers are terrible. And I love LeBron James just as much as anybody else. But LeBron going here 29th, John Morant going 28th. One team is third in the West, and another team is fighting to stay in the play. Is fighting just to stay in the play-in. It's crazy. And this will all change, of course. I'm sure just by tomorrow, when the ADP updates for tomorrow, it'll be huge shifts. But in the time being, I'm not sure it's going to get super efficient for a little while. So anyway, let's get in a draft. If you want to get in, I'm getting in now. 3 more spots. Yeah, Flea sees it. Tatum is 26th. At minimum, the Celtics are basically just as good as everybody else in the East. If you prefer the Sixers, the Bucks, or the Nets, or whatever, I'm not going to argue with you. But the Celtics are not demonstrably different than those teams, and yet their best player goes 26th overall. Obviously, and we'll get in this draft, and he's not going to go 26th. But you get my point. That's how I've been feeling right now so far, is kind of the Celtics. You can get a big gun from one of these other teams, right? Get Giannis, Steph, Embiid, Durant, Harden, Booker, whatever. And then you can kind of start to backfill with these second tier teams that are just a little bit more undervalued, right? Or maybe you get your Jokic, you get one of these guys in Jokic, and then you get your Heat, Celtics, Grizzlies, Bulls, those kind of teams. The Mavs, other than Luka, and even Luka isn't that even. I think I've taken Luka on most of my teams. The Mavs, another team, playing awesome. They can absolutely make a run. Got Eagles here with the 101. Let's see what the best ball wizard does. Takes Giannis. So I'm taking Embiid here And as we get through the draft, one of my first initial takes is guard is crazy loaded. I feel like you'll like never run out of guards, or even like if you want to do these secondary correlations, kind of like we were talking about, right? You start to build out that story that your lineup is telling. I feel like there's like almost always guards and combos of players that include a guard from a team that you can get that's a good player. That like you'll feel comfortable. You're not having to take James Wiseman, right? That we brought up earlier. You're getting a quality player on one of these good teams that you would like to target. The big position gets thin really, really fast, and wing is a little bit better than big, but not like tremendously so. It is definitely guard, by far the most stacked position, then wing, and then big, in my opinion. Which makes sense. There's just less bigs, right? Yeah, wing can run out fast too, but guard definitely like almost never really runs out, in my opinion. The first draft I did, I was just kind of like taking like feeling things out and starting to take. See, so here, like I think I'm gonna take Luka again because I just can't. So I cannot possibly take any of these guys over Luka personally. I just don't see it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And you want to talk about, a first round projection. Give me Joel Embiid and Luka Doncic on the same team. And like, if your team advance rate, like doesn't get much better than that. Eagles stacks the Bucks. And now this is where I'm either going to go Jimmy or Tatum. Let's go Tatum here. Start to set up my Eastern Conference side of things. Getting these darn spam users in the chat. But took Tatum because knowing this group, I was pretty confident he was not going to come back to me 10 picks later. And so one thing I do like that I think most people don't do is they start out attacking a team right away, right? And like what Eagles did makes total sense. You're never going to get those $3 if you didn't take them then. But like for me, the way taking Embiid, obviously Harden is gone, and then I take Luka, and there's not really another Mav besides Luka to take there. So keeping your flexibility open, right? I don't know who my primary team or teams are going to be, but I'm flexible now because I kind of took the superstar from 3 teams that I want to target. And then you start to fill in the gaps as you continue to, build that team. Let's see who is available here. I really don't love Tobias Harris. I'm actually going to put Draymond in the queue. So I have 2 Eastern Conference teams. Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I need to take Tobias, though. I think I actually need to take Tobias. Really hate Tobias, to be totally honest. But when you think about Philly, there's Tyrese Maxey that will, be a guy I can potentially target sometime coming up here. But if I don't take Tobias after that, I really almost am going to want to force Maxey, and there's almost no one beyond those couple of guys. So there goes Draymond. So now I am going to take Maxey though to get so now look, Philly is my main team, right? All right. I'm betting on Philly to make the finals with Embiid, Tobias, and Maxey. And now I have my Mavs. So I'm planning for the Mavs, some kind of other Maverick player down the line, and obviously some other kind of Celtic player down the line. And the dream scenario is going to be, the Sixers and the Mavs playing the championship. I can also build in another Western Conference team as this starts to play out. Sorry, doing some chat. Some chat banning. But that's just as you're going through this the whole time, you're constantly planning ahead. The whole thing is continuing to plan ahead. So that's why like this ADP stuff is wild because you look at the top and it's like Kevon Looney and Jordan Poole and God bless LeBron, but Lakers team that's almost assuredly has no shot to make a run, right? Cam Johnson, like crazy. Bobby Portis. I mean, I like Bobby Portis fine, but we're getting to this point where you're taking the fourth or fifth best player on these. Oh, there goes Jaylen. Darn it. That's who I really wanted. Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen, this is higher than he has been going, but Tatum is a huge bargain. I think Jaylen might have been an even bigger bargain, at least in these initial drafts. He's going to be a huge riser as well. Let me start just putting some guys in the queue here. So I have my 2 Eastern Conference teams. I need to think a little bit about what I want to do with a second Western Conference team. And it is definitely not LeBron, not Conley. I do like the Heat and Lowry, but that does not make sense on this team. Actually, Desmond Bane probably makes a lot of sense here. Jalen Brunson. I could take Brunson and just lock that up. I'm going to do that. I like both Brunson and Dinwiddie, but I'm just going to go ahead and lock up that Mav so that I'm not fretting over scrambling to getting locked out of someone like Spencer Dinwiddie or Dorian Finney-Smith, right? I don't really want to be taking that kind of a guy. Not that you can't, but it's not definitely not my preferred route. Wow. Okay. Eagles takes my Boston guys there. So now I'm just going to have to punt off that next Boston guy. And I am going to take Bane here, though. Set myself up for Grizzlies. One nice thing about taking Embiid and setting up a Sixers run to the finals is, you're definitely not really too worried about the big man. Like as you get to the end of the draft, that's something I've started to feel out. Like you get to the end and you kind of just take, assuming you have the positions filled for all your scenarios, you kind of just take the best player, right? And who knows, maybe you take a late big man that plays a 7-game series and he saves you from if the Sixers sweep somebody. But being flexible on that, right? Definitely being flexible on that. Let's see here. Start adding to my queue. See, look at all these names. So bad. So bad. I'm going to put my guy Steven Adams in there. Boston. Let's see. Because what you'll see when we type in Philadelphia and you see once you get past those 4 guys, is Korkmaz even going to play in the finals? Like Thibault, Danny Green, Niang. Do you really even want to take any of those guys? No, I don't. I do kind of like. I mean, eighth round LeBron is pretty good. Silas, it's pretty good. The nice thing about Memphis is there are a few more guys that you probably feel decent about taking. So I am going to take Steven Adams. I'm sure Eagles is going to take my guy here. Actually, the Derek White versus Marcus Smart thing is pretty interesting. And I guess one perk of this is having gone the Sixers. If I don't get another Celtic, like that's okay. Yeah, it's interesting to me. I mean, I love Derek White, but it is interesting to me that he sits higher on this list than I got a little plan of attack here. I'm going to take Marcus Smart actually, and I love Derek White, but I don't think he should. I don't think he should go over Marcus Smart. Once we get done, we will go through all these teams. Fire through all these teams real quick. Or maybe we'll just do another draft. Maybe we'll do a second draft instead. One more. Yeah, I like both of them. Smart's been awesome. They've both been awesome. There's pretty much just those six core guys, right, for the Celtics. I think it's possible they play Grant Williams a little bit more over Horford in the playoffs, but you don't really want Grant. Don't really want Grant Williams. So instead of taking Derek White here, a guy who I am gonna scoop a little bit here is Dillon Brooks. He's not back. He's obviously not back yet, and it's taken him a little bit longer, I think, to get back than was expected. But if he comes back here sometime before the playoffs and gets ramped up, he's what the I don't know where I would rank him on Memphis. A fully healthy Dillon Brooks, no minutes limits, anything like that. I don't know where I would put him amongst, obviously after Ja. But I don't know where I'd put him amongst Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane, Steven Adams. But he's at least in that mix, but he's not even going to get drafted in these for the longest time. So instead of going through that, let's just hop in one more. Practice makes perfect. We'll do some drafts instead of yeah, this is so true, Mark. Brooks, and you got to love that kind of guy. Hey, Brooks is he's their defender, right? They do there's probably also a little bit of correlation with drafting Dillon Brooks and the potential for them to make a run. Say whatever you want about Dillon Brooks. He's their perimeter defender guy, and getting him back will be huge for them, in terms of their potential to make a run. He's going to be the guy that guards Luka and Devin Booker and those types of guys, right? And so getting him back, and if you're stacking the Grizzlies a little bit, I think their odds increase with a fully healthy Dillon Brooks. Again, say whatever you want about Dillon Brooks, but him playing, wiping out John Conchar from the rotation and then bumping down a little bit of minutes from Kyle Anderson or whatever and giving them to Dillon Brooks is important for them. Yeah, he probably will shoot a little less now in late game situations with Ja and with what Bane has done. But I just think, he's definitely a productive player. He's certainly not going to stand in the corner and watch. It's not the way he plays basketball. And just his role is super important. I'll go back after we're done, Silas, and take a look at the team. And well, you got Giannis on this one, Silas. So I think you'll be all right. And there goes my guy. See, I think I've only picked second or third in all of these. So, that was my entire my fourth draft. So when I say all of them, it's not like we're talking about a big number here, but so I'm probably not super comfortable from this spot here. Ooh, do I go with the Sixers again? Let's do something a little bit different here. I'm gonna take Jokic and then put the pressure on Wolf here at the turn to kind of see who out of these guys he's giving me. Because honestly, KD, Harden, CP3, I'm fine with all those guys, and they're all in the East, and Jokic is in the West. But kind of letting him decide for me which one of these other teams. Oh, God, CP's in the – what am I talking about? Chris Paul's in the West. So he's probably going to take Harden and Durant, and then I'm going to have Chris Paul. But that's okay. We talked about some of the cheaper Eastern Conference teams that might be available to me to load up on. Might be auto-drafting. What else is up here? Yeah, not much. I could do Luka, too. Get really crazy. Jokic, Luka. That might be kind of fun, actually. I mean, Luka is definitely going to score. Let's do that. if I'm going to do two teams in the West, everybody's going to default to like these guys here at the top. But like, from a per game production standpoint, I love CP3, but he doesn't hold a candle to Jokic and Luka. And now, obviously, moving forward here in 8 picks, when I'm up again, we'll be looking to see what's available in the East. But just another, keeping my flexibility open to start the draft with 2 superstars from 2 teams that I know I can attach guys later, right? I love that Tatum is like going in the top 15 in our drafts, and his ADP was opened at 26. That's pretty funny. Like, look at it. This ADP is so bad. They're like, the whole Warriors team is in the top 12 or whatever, and then Draymond, who like Jordan Poole 20 ADP and Draymond 23. Like, what? Like, who set this? How does this even get set? Obviously, that will not continue, but it was interesting, to say the least. Hoping I can get one of my hoping I can get a couple guys from one of my my mid-round Eastern Conference teams. So I would like to get as many of those as I can before this ADP adjusts. So maybe I'll just be drafting these teams the rest of the night to try to get to a ton of these like Celtics and such. Yeah, so here is where I'm going to go to Jimmy. So I would love to take Drew, right? You might say, like, why would you not take Drew Holiday? The problem is, like, he's okay, and I'll consider him here at 20. But when Giannis and Middleton are already gone, it's like if the Bucks really make a run here, I'm going to put him in the queue. But what I'm actually going to do is take Bam first. And so now, I've made my bet on the Heat, who's between them and the Celtics, those are definitely my 2 favorite kind of undervalued teams. And I just wrap up those guys, the 2 best players from that team. There's still more Heat available later. I know that there are more Mavericks and Nuggets available later. And so this team is set up well from a flexibility perspective. I want to see what Hawkberg's team looks like, though, with getting Drew there. So he's got Phoenix, and then he's got CP and Ayton with Embiid and Drew. That's pretty sexy. So we gifted Hawkberg a pretty fun start there. Goodness, that's nice. That's nice. I guess I should start looking a little bit at the queue here. So 2 Heat, 1 Nugget, 1 Maverick. I'm just going to start adding those teams to my queue. What, Brunson, Dinwiddie. I did see another interesting name, similar, not quite the same, but similar to Dylan Brooks. Oladipo is about to be back, and I'm certainly not expecting too much from Victor Oladipo, but he does make for an interesting pick in these drafts. See, I can't. I'll take Hero because his ADP is higher, just in case Wolf. Just in case Wolf is going to like pick off of ADP, but I can't really in good faith take Tyler Hero over Kyle Lowry. And maybe that's just bias, but I really do think Lowry should be ahead of Hero. But trying to lock down my Heat here. Nice thing about the Heat is you get every position covered with their best players, right? With Jimmy being a wing and with Bam being a center. Kind of like the Celtics. It's kind of like the Celtics with obviously Tatum and Brown are wings, and then you have Smart and Derek White are guards, and you have Rob Williams and Horford as bigs. It's really nice when you have that kind of flexibility and you can fill all those positions. It's just another huge perk of those teams, which again, I imagine that those teams are going to rise pretty significantly as we continue on through this. But for now, and even then when they rise, it'll be totally fine. You just mix in some new later round guys. But it's an extra really nice added perk. See, there goes Smart. Yeah, great call, Flea. Flea's just Chicago's the same way, right? DeRozan on the wing, Vooch as a big, Levine as a guard, Lonzo and Caruso as guards. Io, if you want to toss an Io in there. Probably even have like a Javante, no guard. Eric Jones wing. So if you really have to pick the bottom of the barrel, it's available to you. So I'm not going to take another Heat. So let's get to, wow, Ben Simmons still around. That's pretty crazy. I might consider Simmons here. Like a Simmons Curry, maybe. Simmons Curry. How many guards do I have? Oh, yeah, we're fine at guard. Simmons Curry. Then I could fill the wing with like Dorian Finney-Smith, Nuggets guys. And just give me that second. Yeah. I feel like I have to take Ben Simmons here. I'm crazy bullish on Simmons. Yeah, I could certainly end up wrong. He's Ben Simmons. We've seen the downside to Ben Simmons, but I just can't dream of a better role. My take on the whole trade was I couldn't dream of a better landing spot for Ben Simmons than Brooklyn. They play small ball and he's the 5, but also the point guard on the other end. The spacing that they'll be able to put around him is just so perfect for him. The tempo at which they're going to want to play is perfect for him. He's just, in my opinion, just a fantasy smash on the Nets. I know he has to get back and all that, but I suspect they're just being cautious, right, with him, bringing him back with any getting up to speed, injury, health-wise, mental health-wise, all that stuff. And I just can't envision a scenario in which he doesn't just absolutely smash. Now, obviously, if the situation like we talked about when we were looking at the 538 stuff, that it's an uphill climb for them. But spending this draft capital, right, is nice. And so this is where I'm going to take Seth Curry because I do still think having those secondary correlations is important, even if you're not betting on that, right? I've made my bet basically on the Heat to make the finals. That's basically what I need on this team, right? And then I'm going to have 2 different Western Conference teams that can make the finals against the Heat that will give me my payoff. But we talked about kind of like threading that needle of hoping to continue to advance. That's where, like, to me, some of these secondary correlations come into account. That I've taken Ben Simmons, and now just putting on Seth Curry is like, okay, even if one of my Western Conference teams get knocked out, I like if the Nets win a couple of series, maybe the Heat play the Nets, even if they play the Nets in the second round, it gives me a couple of rounds of just production from those spots that can save you. Instead of trying to cherry pick one-offs from those, you can end up if you did that last year with the Hawks and you went Trey and John Collins or Capella or whatever as your kind of secondary. It didn't even have to be Trey, I guess, necessarily, right? You just stack a couple of Hawks as secondary players, and the next thing you know, they win a couple series from your mid to late round picks. Especially they're going 7 games. They're just compiling so many stats that you're just having to get less things right by like, do I really care about Seth Curry? No, not particularly. But when I've made that commitment now to Ben Simmons, this just allows me to simplify things instead of trying to cherry pick a bunch of one-offs. Now I'm going to hopefully these 2 guys don't take okay, good. They don't. So now is where I'm going to have to decide between Barton, Gordon, Jamal Murray. I don't think I'm going to do. I am still going to take Brunson over Dinwiddie, and now I have to decide between these Nuggets, and that is the difficult part. I don't think I'm in on MPJ coming back, and so it will be, Jamal Murray versus Aaron Gordon or Will Barton. And one thing, as I think this through, if I'm going to bet on the Nuggets to make a run, I do think that is largely contingent upon Jamal Murray coming back. And so it's a 10th round pick. I don't want to throw away picks, which is why I don't think I want to go as far as to draft MPJ. But I think I do only have Jimmy. So I guess that would be maybe I do think now I'm talking myself into Aaron Gordon just because I have so many guards that even Jamal Murray coming back, I'm not sure how much it benefits this team. But anyway, what I was going to say is on most teams, if I'm making that bet on the Nuggets to kind of make a run, I think I would rather bet on Jamal Murray because I think, if he doesn't come back, he doesn't come back. They probably aren't going to make a run then anyway without Jamal Murray. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I think it's a lot less likely that they make a run without Jamal Murray. So when you're making that bet, right, on this Nuggets team, I would rather go all in on that bet with the thing that would probably elevate them to really be able to make a run, and that's Jamal Murray. However, like you said, on this particular team, I think adding that second wing in Aaron Gordon was just a little bit more important. Just to have that, right? I've made that bet on the Heat, but that doesn't mean I don't want this team to die. This is, again, that threading that needle. I don't want this team to die because the Heat sweep somebody in the first round, right? The Heat play. Let me pull up. The Heat play, the Hornets. The Hornets are the 8 seed, maybe the Hornets. Well, I guess they could be playing the Nets. Let's pretend the Nets get to the 7 seed and end up playing the Sixers in the first round in this fun little scenario we've now dreamed up for ourselves with this team. And let's say either Toronto or the Hornets are the 8 seed. One of those teams is the 8 seed or the Hawks, right? And the Heat maintain this one seed. If that happens and they sweep that team, I don't want to lose this team, right? Like we talked about with the Suns Bucks thing last year. I want to be able to try to thread that needle a little bit with that wing position where maybe AG gets 6 or 7 games in that first round and saves me from a Heat sweep. And whereas even if Jamal Murray does come back, right, that's helpful. That's absolutely helpful to me. But I have 2 guards from the Heat. I have 6 total guards on my entire roster. And so the gains that I get from Jamal Murray on this particular team are just a little bit less, even though I think the gains in general on most teams would be more better suited for Jamal Murray. So that is the first. I have just to hit the last couple of things. Any interest in LaMelo? Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think the Hornets could, I definitely think the Hornets could get out of the play-in. Do I think that they can beat the Heat or the Sixers or the Bucks? Probably not, but crazier things have happened, right? They have a good team. I think they are, I would call them similar to, for you guys that played the NFL playoff best ball, similar to your Raiders, Eagles, those kind of guys. You get to the end of your draft and maybe it didn't play out perfectly, or maybe it even did. You stack the Bucks early and then you stack the Grizzlies, and you're looking for another team to attach as this, correlation, or you're trying to, again, help push that team through. Well, LaMelo could be that, right? Kind of like LeBron. Sounds crazy to say. LeBron is a better version of this, of course. See, the dogs are like my alarm bell. They're playing now, and that apparently means it's time to wrap up. But LaMelo is that for me. And as Mark says, we will definitely be talking more in the Discord. I'll be drafting plenty, and we will be talking all kinds of strategy, teams, players, and everything. Spikeweek.com, and find the link to the free Discord in the header. Thanks, you guys. This was a ton of fun. I love this format. We'll be doing plenty more of these drafts over the course of the next month until the NBA playoff starts. So again, check you guys out in the Discord. Be back tomorrow. If you're also a football fan, with @King Coakley, Rob Coakley, we'll be doing the Spike Week football show tomorrow night. Till then, I will catch you guys later.